Good evening. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We're excited to really, formally launch the conversation regarding facility master planning phase 2. My name is Bob Hunt. I'm proud to serve as the superintendent of schools here at Upper Arlington, and just appreciate you coming. This is my second year in the district. I describe the first year as drinking from a fire hose to try to understand all of the wonderful things that are existing here and work collaboratively with our board on the direction moving forward. It has been an amazing place for me professionally and also personally. I have 4 children, 2 of which are still in school, and they attend Greensview Elementary. So we have the luxury of being able to push them out the door and let them ride their bikes to school every day. Also have the benefit of enjoying the wonderful facilities that came out of phase 1 in this. This evening I am joined by 2 members of our Board of Education, and I just would appreciate you recognize them. We've got Lori Trent and Liz Stump in attendance tonight. Please give them a round of applause. They've really been working overtime as board members the last couple of days here. We just hosted a group that's called the Eastern States Consortium. So that's 13 school districts east of the Mississippi that are dedicated to kind of growing and improving together. And every year they hold a site visit in one of the 13 locations. And I had never been on one of the site visits, being new. And I think we must have been absent for the vote because we were selected to be the site visit this year. So we just finished up the site visit today. And I can tell you, often it's very beneficial to have an outside perspective and an outside look at what you offer to kids. And you should be, as a community, as staff members, very, very proud of the program that we bring to students every single day, from what is offered to the total student experience. They were just blown away. And that's because this district has taken the approach that we work collaboratively to develop a program that's reflective of the desires of our community. And my hope is this process will demonstrate the continuation of that moving forward. So we had an opportunity to tour the high school, talked about our education programs, went out to Greensview and looked at Explorations. So some of our students here might know what Explorations is. And they were just blown away by the offerings. The other thing, and I was telling Mr. Carney up here, they were blown away by the leaves. The beautiful leaves that they were able to. So like every other block, we had to stop to take a picture as we were moving around the district. I'm also going to just recognize Dr. Santiani, who just showed up from the Board of Education as well. Welcome. Okay, so tonight we are excited to launch into a conversation with our community about the next phase of facilities in Upper Arlington schools. Many of you know the district went through an extensive process to look at all of the facilities, including Jones, Hastings, and Burbank, and that started in 2014. That's when this launched and began. And through the engagement and the conversation, decisions were made to move forward with phase 1. And I think it was important at that time that all 5 elementaries move together and be addressed in that phase, as well as Upper Arlington High School. I'll talk in a minute about what was achieved in those other phases, or what was achieved and identified for phase 2. But I think, when we look at what lies ahead, when I've been talking about this, people are shocked when I say, a commitment was made that in 10 years we would talk about phase 2. And I hate to be the bearer of news, but it's been 10 years since the community started this conversation. So we're excited to look at kind of where we've been and where we're going to go. In phase number 1, there was over 8,400 touch points. And I don't have this as a scoreboard. We're not going to benchmark our success based on that. But I think what it demonstrates, and it certainly indicated to me, that it has to be a community conversation, a community decision process as we look at what options exist and what we need to do to move forward. From someone who just joined the district, I saw this picture and was like, where does that place exist? And it no longer does. So, that obviously that's a visual of some of the change that has occurred. So in phase one, we looked at a couple of phases and when things should or could be addressed based on the useful life of the mechanical systems and the facilities at that time. And it was identified that Upper Arlington High School should be addressed in 0 to 5 years, the 5 elementaries in Burbank in 5 to 10, and then Hastings and Jones Middle School in 10 to 15. Obviously, we're still talking about Burbank. We've got our principal and director over there, and he's probably like, wait a second, why wasn't Burbank? There's obviously financial considerations. There's obviously capacity, how much you can go through in construction. So all of those things played into kind of moving Burbank into phase 2 of the conversation. Want to be really clear on this slide and take a moment here. Because I think the power in phase 1 was there wasn't a plan that was brought to the community and introduced as the solution. We need to work with you to evaluate multiple solutions and look at what is the best option moving forward. So although a lot of work was done in phase 1 on these 3 facilities from assessments and things of that nature, which is awesome because we can build upon that work, there is no preconceived, this is what we're going to do. That is why we're going through engagement and all the work that we're going to talk about tonight. The other thing is, there is not a zero cost option. As we looked at those slides and looking at when useful life ends with certain facilities and for certain components within our capital budget and within the improvements that are necessary, we're going to have to make significant investments in these buildings. So there will be costs related to, even a status quo solution will have costs related to it. And I think, as we've already talked about, we need to hear from our constituents, we need to hear from our community, and they need to be engaged throughout that process. And I think transparency in terms of sharing of information, we will commit to do that throughout, and tonight, hopefully, is the beginning of that moving forward. So before we dive in, really the goal of tonight is for you to walk away and understand what the process is going to look like from now until September, October of next year as we make recommendations to the Board of Education. Also kind of understand where are the opportunities for you to plug into those conversations. I want to kind of center here because our business, at the core of what we do every single day, is educating kids. And the programs that we offer, the experience that we provide is and will remain the most important thing. And we have to solve these problems together. We have to look at these facilities so we do not put ourselves in a situation where we're having to take resources away from the programs that we offer and the things that we do for kids that we know are meeting their needs to plug into facilities and addressing large-scale issues. So our core business will remain the education of students. I think what is nice, in phase 1, we had to go to all these places to look at facilities and see how a facility could impact education. Well, they exist here now. So I have had lots of conversations with students as they've gone through our elementaries and into our middle schools, and with parents as well, really identifying the differences. And it's more than paint, it's how you structure, it's how you lay out and create space to support the education of students moving forward. So I'm going to jump here in a minute to talk a little bit about strategic planning, just to give you at a very high level some direction on where we're headed with the educational direction of the district. So when I came to the district, the Board of Education asked that we develop a plan and a process to engage and create a strategic plan. So the strategic plan that we're currently operating sunsets in 2024. Many of you that are familiar with that district know there are 3 main buckets within that. There's the whole child bucket, well-being, and continuous improvement, and that has been the driving force for the district over the last 7 to 10 years. We spent last fall gathering all kinds of data and information from all of our stakeholders. We took that to 50 people that represented our community and our staff to develop inquiry teams and really challenged them to think about where are we at in these areas and where do we aspire to be in these areas. And I'm not going to go completely into the strategic plan tonight. I just want to hit at a high level. Two words kept coming up as we talked about Upper Arlington schools. The idea of excellence, that we are a lighthouse district that continuously improves, that is constantly striving and understands that the world is constantly changing and what we offer here needs to change. The second was an idea of innovation, providing the space for our teachers and our staff to innovate the educational experience. And with that, people would often point to programs. They'd point to, well, we offer progressive education. That's innovative. It's a choice program that others don't. We have IB that's balanced with AP. Those are offerings as well. And honestly, I think every district aspires to be a place where staff innovates and is constantly pushing what we offer to students. But the reality of COVID-19 put us all in a kind of a freeze, and we were in a survival mode. So I think this is a reflection of an interest in what is the next iteration of innovation for Upper Arlington schools. So within that, we've got three core areas: engaged learning, culture and climate, and connections. At a very high level, engaged learning, a lot came out with a commitment to really embedding and incorporating our profile of an engaged learner. That is a document that articulates the skills and competencies that we want to develop in young people. Things like teamwork and empathy and communication. We know there's core content knowledge we have to teach, but we want to structure educational experiences that also create and develop those skills. So looking at engaged learning. And under culture and climate, a lot of our diversity equity work, as well as looking at how we provide professional development to staff, so that we can support and create really authentic learning experiences for students under that engaged learning bucket. And the last is connections. This came a lot from the idea of transparency, sharing of information, creating opportunities like this to engage community in conversation about our schools, as well as in connections. It's actually articulated that we would go through the process that we're sitting here tonight, to go through phase 2 of facility master planning. What remained unchanged in all of this, because often you start with a strategic plan with let's talk mission, vision, and values. And it became really clear that these still remain at the core of who we are and what we do. I have never seen organizationally mission, vision, and values defined and at the heart of what happens throughout our organization. The other thing is, I really believe these are represented and embraced by our community as well. So the mission, vision, values work with strategic planning was really easy. I just asked them to rebrand it a little bit and put some different colors with it, and we moved on. So this remains our core and will, in our new strategic plan, remain the same. So just a couple of statistics as we look at things moving forward. One of the things you look at when you're long-range planning, our board is always looking at projections in terms of enrollment. We wanted to give you a little perspective on that. So this just goes back, the dark, our 2014 to 2023 numbers. So those are actual numbers, students that attended our school district. And then the yellow represent projections moving out. Obviously, this indicates we will have steady growth going forward into to 2033 on this graph up here. The nice thing about this slide is these projections and these actuals align with what was used in facility phase 1. So our facilities were built in that way, and I think also the district was very thoughtful in making sure even the elementaries that were built, there were conversations about if we needed to make additions, where would those go in the future. So these are our enrollment projections and will serve us well as we move forward into this. So there's going to be 3 phases to this process. There's going to be the assessment phase where we look at all of our facilities, and I'm going to have some others talk about that a little bit here in a minute. The options phase where we weigh what options are available to us and then there will be the decision phase. So in those 3 phases, we're going to continue to engage as we go forward. This is the structure that we're using in terms you may hear and see in publications and communications that we sent out. So this is our structure of walking through this process. There's an oversight committee that's made up of district staff, our partners, vendors that are helping, a few of which I'll introduce in a minute, facilitate this process. This group meets every other week and kind of keeps things moving forward. There's the facilities task force. This is a group of individuals from our community that have expertise in some level of facility, either planning, construction, development, real estate. It's a sounding board for us to use, meets once a month as we move through this to help make sure that we're engaging the professional knowledge that we have in the district. At some point, we will form a financial advisory board. That's when we have those options laid out and we have cost built to those options, and we really hand that over to that team to wrestle with what option, how would we structure payment, how would we move forward with those things. All of those teams will help inform me as I make a recommendation to our Board of Education. Our Board of Education is obviously the final decision maker in what goes forward, but the actual final decision maker is always the community of Upper Arlington. So we try to, you see them on the top and the bottom of this, the thought is we want to engage the community as much as we possibly can on the front end, because on the other side of this, whatever we bring forward is a decision to be made by the community. So this is just another way of structuring that from an inform, recommend, and decide standpoint. A couple of, I think, really important slides. In phase 1, there were some guiding principles that were established. We asked that our facility task force look at those guiding principles, make updates and changes. And this is really kind of the directionally, as we think about our facilities, what are the things that we want to use to guide us moving forward? And we're going to ask you tonight to give us some input into these things. I'm not going to read them to you. Obviously, you can do that, but we'll share a copy of these, and we'll ask to get some feedback from you as we go forward. I do want to spend some time on planning parameters. So we've asked both our steering committee, couldn't do it, and our task force, our oversight committee and our task force, to develop planning parameters that we could then work with our Board of Education on. And for me, I use planning parameters as these are the non-negotiable items. So we worked through those, developed a draft, worked with our Board of Education, asked for input, and we asked that our board actually approve these things so we know kind of the parameters of this process moving forward. So I just want to talk briefly about these so everybody's on the same page. The first one is just to kind of overtly state that we're talking about and working deeply with Hastings, Jones, and Burbank. So all 3 of those facilities will be looked at. Second, I think speaks to process to ensure it's transparent and that there is no preconceived plans. We do not have a plan in a closet that we're just going to roll out and say this is what we're going to do. We really need to engage in conversation and problem solve together to figure out the future and the direction. We want to make sure we're cognizant of enrollment projections, not only now but in the future, certainly in the buildings that we're looking at, but also outside in other buildings as well. There was conversation, but was decided that a parameter was retaining 1 middle school to ensure that we have offerings for all of our students and that we would not redistrict in that. So that was a planning parameter as well. Yes? Oh, sorry. This was almost a very quick process. Thank you, Andy. I'm just glad you're listening over there. 2 middle schools, retain 2 middle schools. Any new construction and renovation should include modern day and future-ready learning environments. I think that was probably a conversation that really needed to happen in phase 1. Now you have examples of facilities that support where teaching and learning is at today. So it's the idea of we're not recreating kind of a 1950s classroom because that's not how education is structured. Balance initial costs and life cycle costs, so we're kind of building for the future and building in a way that is financially responsible, but also in a way that ensures that our buildings are going to be here for the next 50 years. Include easily accessible, gender-specific, and gender-neutral restrooms in each of our schools. So we wanted to put that out as a parameter right out of the gate. And then lastly, newer renovated facilities should provide spaces for learning, gathering, arts, athletics, and activities that are comparable to both the current facilities and facilities in the same grade level. So when you think about the two middle schools, making sure that offerings and options in both buildings are the same for all of our students. So those are parameters established, and tonight we'll ask you to give us some feedback and thoughts into those parameters as well. All right, so I'm going to now hand it over to our partners from Perkins Will. Steve, I'll let you introduce yourself, and Amy. I will just say that as I came in the district and learned about the work that has been done in the past, people kept commenting on the relationship and the partnership that existed between Upper Arlington and Perkins and Will. So we're just excited to have them as part of our team kind of moving forward.
Great, thank you, Bob. We are delighted to be back. In fact, we actually haven't left. We've been around an awful lot working with UA and other school districts around the Columbus area. So we are delighted to be back. My name is Steve Turks. I am a principal and an architect at Perkins and Will, one of the leaders of our K-12 practice. And?
My name is Amy Eckman. I am the firm-wide K-12 practice leader for Perkins and Will, and have worked with Steve throughout this process the first time, and glad to be back as well.
And joining us from Moody Nolan, our partner firm, is Paul Garland. Paul is an architect with Moody Nolan. He also happens to be the assistant soccer coach for the varsity team or JV? Varsity team. So you may have seen Paul, if your kids play high school soccer, you may have seen Paul wandering around the field with your kids. Okay, let's move on. We are going to talk a little bit about the process and a little bit about some of the things we've actually been up to as recently as today. We did the master plan, the initial master plan back in 2015. We are now essentially doing a phase 2, sort of an update to that, looking again hard at the middle schools and Burbank Elementary. But we generally think of master plans as having 3 major pieces. One is an assessment of the physical nature of each building. In other words, what condition are the roofs in, mechanical systems, HVAC systems, plumbing, electrical, and so forth. What's fit and finish, finishes within the building. But we also look at what we call educational adequacy, and we were doing some of these tours today. In fact, we were here at Jones. We were at Burbank this morning. Tomorrow we will be at Hastings, walking through and sort of kicking the tires, like how's the building actually functioning as a school? Is it meeting teaching and learning needs and objectives? Are spaces big enough? How do they relate to each other? And then the third piece of that puzzle is a financial assessment. So once we have got the sort of the physical assessment, the educational assessment done, and really understand from a space standpoint what changes or alterations might need to happen, and we go into the options phase that Dr. Hunt talked about. A little bit later into that options phase, when we're beginning to sort of get our arms around it, we will put dollars to each of the options. If you participated in the last master planning process, you'll remember that at some point we talked money, right? We'll do the same thing here. So that's the financial assessment. We bring that all together, right? And that becomes sort of the basis for the master plan. Okay. Dr. Hunt talked about the guiding principles and the parameters. We have created a rubric for the educational adequacy assessment that includes particularly the guiding principles, right? And we're talking about, with each of the principles and walking through and doing our own observations, how do the buildings sort of stack up against those guiding principles? This is essentially the exact same process we used during phase 1. And so that's a lens we look at to really begin to evaluate, not just, what condition are the roofs in, but really sort of, the important aspect of how does the building actually function as a school. The physical adequacy assessment is also being updated at the same time. Earlier today in various buildings, a group of engineers was walking through, looking at mechanical systems. In fact, I think, Greg, you said you spent about an hour down in the lower bowels of this building looking at what is down below here. In fact, if you didn't know, there's actually a lower level of this building that's got a bunch of mechanical systems in it. So that's all being evaluated. It is being updated from that look that happened in 2015 to today. Costs will be associated with that, and those costs will be, what would it take just to fix what you have? Not necessarily making educational improvements, but it's good baseline information to understand, okay, if a roof needs to be replaced 5 years from now, let's target some dollars to be able to do that. And understand, before we move into, are we going to actually remove that roof as a part of a project, so that you're making good capital investments from now and into the future. So that is underway. So some of the things that got looked at: HVAC systems, plumbing systems, lighting, life safety, finishes, that type of thing. All the sort of physical aspects to the building.
Okay. So for the educational assessment, what we were doing at Jones and Burbank today and what we'll do at Hastings tomorrow, we're looking at those through the different lens, again, around room size and shape, adjacencies of space, acoustics, technology, safety and security, circulation, et cetera. So those are some of the line items that we spent lots of time walking through with these folks today. And how do we do it? There was student focus groups, student teams were up on the screen. We're talking to students tomorrow at Hastings and in a few weeks at Jones to make sure that we get their feedback on this process and the pieces and parts that are exciting to them. And many of them will have been through your elementary schools, so they're familiar with what's possible. We also spent time with Chris and Amy today, and we'll be doing that tomorrow again at Hastings, and spent a couple hours walking through the facilities, looking at them through the way they use them and the way that the students use the facilities and educators. And then building team meetings. Andy's going to talk to you about those a little bit later, but it's another more focused way for you all to get involved specifically around the buildings and offer feedback around each option. So for those of you who are around in 2015 for this process, we shared this diagram, which is the same diagram, but we took off the elementary schools and the high school because they're no longer, they're updated, right? So these are the original ages of the buildings that are in question. Jones, happy 100th birthday to the original facility. Hastings, 1961, and Burbank, built in 1971. And these are the last major additions to those facilities. So Burbank has not been touched since Nixon. Hastings and Jones got some renovations, but quite some time ago. And that's kind of just setting the context there. And here we're going to have Andy talk about the building teams.
This clicker work the way it's supposed to. Good evening. For those of you that I have not met, I am Andy Geisfeld. I am the treasurer, CFO of the district. I've been here about 19 years. But I laugh about Burbank, right? Burbank is where I went to elementary school. So when I look at it, hasn't been touched since, 71. I feel like I thought it hadn't been changed enough when I was there, and you can kind of see just how it grows over time. But one of the things that, as I'm standing in front of you here, I almost feel like the movie Groundhog Day. You remember that, where it's like every day you're waking up and reliving the same thing? I feel like just yesterday I was in front of you all talking about phase one. And the beauty of phase one was the amount of touches we had from people, right? How involved they were. And the best way to get involved, and I guess I'm in charge of this, we'll come back to that, but the best way to get involved is to have building teams, right? We want people involved in every building. What does that mean? That means that we will, you'll work with the principal, you'll work with the architects to really share and to think about the challenges and the possibilities of each building. Why do you want to be on these? Your voice matters. We've been saying that from the first time. to now this time is we truly have no preconceived notions. And with that, we need you to help us, lead us through this to really figure out what are the challenges and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Because each building has their own challenges that we'll find over time. So with that, you are the resource for the entire community. As you saw from the slide earlier that Dr. Hunt shared, you're on the top of it and the bottom of it, because really the community drives these decisions. And to understand really the challenges that you see or the good things that you see, because our buildings have experienced a lot of I guess experiences. I'm almost saying they've experienced the kids growing up. You've seen them. Maybe you've been through there. Maybe your grandkids have been through these buildings. Maybe you're a future. We want people on these building teams that have lived through this, that are going to be coming through this, that maybe have been through this many years ago, or maybe the ones that are here. We want you to grab your neighbors. We want you to grab your friends. We want you to grab people who just moved into the district, because really it impacts everyone in this community. So what are the goals of the building teams? It really is to get the feedback, right? To get the feedback from those that use the buildings, or those that have experienced the buildings, or those who want to be part of those buildings, and then share those with the community. What you'll see here that I skipped a second ago is what does it mean then? So we have the schedule here, and you'll see the green's the assessment, the blue's the options, and then the yellow's the decisions. But with that, there are meetings then from the building team early on, basically for 3 building team meetings over the early part of the planning phase before we really get to too much of the options, with the idea to help us develop those options. We need to have the planning first. So that's really where you come in. We're hoping you're interested in helping us with this and bringing in your peers. You can see that we have meetings in December, February, and April with this to really get the feedback, to really understand what the building committee is sharing with us, and we're doing it in the various buildings. And then you see here that please take this ID, scan it, sign up. We're looking to go ahead. We'll have some paper documents too if you just want to sign up on the paper documents, or you can take this with you just to encourage people. This process does not work unless you're all involved. And we truly do mean that. We meant it before, and then Dr. Hunt's come in with the board and basically said, we want the exact same process of that involvement. So this is where you come in. This is where it's easy to talk sometimes, but sometimes it's harder to get your hands wet. We want you to get your hands wet and join us in this process. So with that being said, I will turn it back over to Amy.
Just a really quick recap of what we did on Friday. Brought together a group of leaders around the district, folks in every building, including the ones most recently renovated, administrators, community members, folks on the facilities task force, et cetera. I think probably 40-ish, 45 people roughly at the Graf Center. And we did similar to what we're doing today, but a little bit of a deeper dive in that look ahead, and a little bit more deeper dive on the excellence and innovation, the strategic planning. And then we asked the groups to get together and did some small group work around the lessons learned from the elementary school projects and the high school project. So it was really informative and a way for us to take off on the right foot for the next phase. And then we asked them to do an exercise, in which we're going to ask you to do tonight, which is review and revise the guiding principles that are 9 years old, and ask them, what would you change, what would you do differently? And there were a few great comments, again, through the lens of that strategic plan as well. So with that, we're going to turn it back over to Dr. Hunt.
Okay, so just a reminder, an overview of timeline. So between now and September, really, of next year, the next community meeting, number 2, will actually be a sharing out of the assessments and the results, and having conversation around those. The point of tonight was, 1, give you an overview of process, but 2, just really encourage you to, if you have an interest in a certain building, to engage and get involved in the building teams. If you think about each of those buildings and facilities, they each have a unique challenge ahead of them in terms of what the future may look like, and each of them have different educational requirements. So in the building level, you can really sit down with experts from Burbank and hear what the needs of a preschool classroom need and what deficits exist and problem solve around it. So a very unique challenge. A Hastings, a 1960 structure, and where it sits, a middle school concept. How does that structure? And then when I was in Chagrin Falls, we had a 1914 elementary building in the center of town. So I have been through valuing history and understanding and appreciating it. The nuances that are going to be engaged and involved with the conversation around Jones are equally as important. So just encourage you that if you have the capacity and the time to participate in those building meetings as we go forward. So we have done a lot of talking, and how we'd like to end tonight is have you we're going to pass out to you a copy of our principles and parameters. There's a QR code up there for those of you who like QR codes, and you can just fill this out online. We also have paper copies if you're like me and you like to write things down. We would like to get your feedback on the principles and parameters. So certainly you can do that independently and individually, or have conversations at your table. We are here. We've got administrative team members here to engage in conversation around that. So what we'd like you to do is kind of turn that over to you for your feedback tonight. Again, encourage you to get involved in the building teams, and when you're done kind of giving that feedback, that really will end the evening. The other thing that we obviously will do, we are here to answer your questions as well. So as you provide your feedback, if you have questions, let us know. But certainly also, if there's something that you want to talk more about that we talked about tonight or involving this process, we're here to answer your questions as well.